I walked into the boardroom with calm, steady steps, my heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. There he was, my brother James, sitting across the table in a tailored suit, eyes scanning his notes, completely unaware that the woman he had spent years mocking was about to interview him as the CEO. He looked up, his jaw dropped. "Tori, what are you doing here?" I smiled. "Conducting your final interview for the company I built from scratch." You could hear the air leave the room. The same brother who once laughed at my little website now desperately needed a job. And I was the one holding the decision. You see, James used to humiliate me at family dinners, offering to teach me how money works and covering my bills like I was a child. He had no idea that while he flaunted his Wall Street bonuses, I was quietly building a tech empire. And now, he was applying to work for me. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you? What would you do if the tables suddenly turned? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris for more stories where karma hits back hard. My name is Victoria Blackwell, Tori for short. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in Seattle, Washington. For most of my life, I lived in my older brother's shadow. James was the golden child, charming, driven, the straight-A student who got into Yale and then leapt straight into Wall Street. At every family gathering, the room revolved around him. He'd walk in with a $1,000 coat, talk about mergers and investment portfolios like he was saving the world, and make sure everyone knew how well he was doing. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the one who liked building things. I studied computer science but ended up working customer support at a software company for years. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it, until the layoffs came. I was 32, newly divorced, and suddenly jobless. James's reaction? "Well, maybe it's time you picked a more serious career path." He even sent me a link to a financial literacy course. No context, no message, just the link. That was James in a nutshell, helpful only if it made him look superior. But I didn't tell anyone what I was really up to. After losing my job, I used my severance to start a side project, a small software tool for local clinics to manage patient flow and data security. I worked late nights in my cramped apartment, surviving on instant noodles and ambition. No one in my family took it seriously, especially James. One Thanksgiving, he raised his glass and joked, "To Tori, still making magic with her little website." Everyone laughed, even my parents. I laughed too, but something inside me cracked that night. Still, I stayed quiet. I never mentioned the first contract I landed with a private practice, or the moment I incorporated neurotech solutions. I didn't mention the first time I had to hire help, because I couldn't keep up with the client requests. Instead of bragging, I focused on building. I kept my name off the parent company, operating under Meridian Holdings. To my family, I was still the quirky sister who wore hoodies to dinner and probably needed help filing taxes. Then came the divorce. My husband of 10 years left, and the legal fees nearly wiped me out. James, of course, saw it as another opportunity to prove his dominance. At our parents' 40th anniversary, he loudly announced he'd cover Tori's portion of the group gift. Don't worry about it. That night, I went home and stared at the contract I'd just signed with a regional hospital network. It was worth more than James's annual bonus, but I didn't say a word. I didn't need validation. I just needed time. Because I knew someday the balance would shift. And it did, sooner than I expected. About a year after the anniversary dinner, things began to accelerate for neurotech. We'd just completed a beta rollout of our scheduling software across 3 hospitals in the region, and the feedback was beyond what I hoped for. Word spread fast in the healthcare tech space. Our system was secure, user-friendly, and customizable. By then, I had a lean but brilliant team of developers and client support staff. What started in my living room now had an office space in downtown Seattle. Still, no press releases, no media coverage. I liked it that way. To my family, I was still doing tech stuff, which to them meant playing around on a laptop with no clear income. James continued his role as the crown prince of condescension. "Are you still working from cafes?" He chuckled one evening during a family Zoom call. "No," I said calmly. "We moved into a space last month." "We? Oh, cute. A partner?" "Team," I corrected. "I run a company now." James raised an eyebrow. "How many employees?" 17. He blinked. "Real employees? Like, on payroll?" "Real ones," I smiled, "with health insurance and everything." That shut him up, temporarily. Then, life took its turn. James lost his job. I didn't find out from him. I found out from my mom in one of her half-whispered updates. There was some merger. The bank's restructuring. James didn't get the position he was promised. At first, I was shocked. James had always seemed untouchable, the golden boy immune to corporate shakeups. But even Wall Street eats its own. For months, he pretended like everything was fine. He still wore designer shoes to family dinners, still bragged about investments, but the cracks were showing. He stopped mentioning bonuses. He no longer talked about market trends. And for the first time in my life, James looked tired. Then one Monday morning, my HR director forwarded me an application. "We've got a strong candidate for the new CFO role. Excellent resume, take a look." I opened the file. James Blackwell. My stomach flipped. I had to reread the name 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. But there it was. His full resume, LinkedIn profile, a cover letter that actually began with, "I'm excited about the future of healthcare technology." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Of all the companies he could have applied to, of all the job boards, all the recruiter connections he had, he landed on mine. And he had no idea. I could have ended it right there, rejected him quietly, saved myself the awkwardness, but instead, I let the process play out. My COO conducted the first interview. James was sharp, polished, confident as ever, but no hint of arrogance. He needed this job, that was clear, and he didn't know who sat at the top. I watched the recordings, listened to every word. He even said, "This company's financial model is clean. Someone smart built this from the ground up." I paused the video. Someone smart. Someone like me. The second interview went just as well. The team was impressed. On paper, and in person, James was a great fit. And so we scheduled the final interview, the one with the CEO, the one he didn't see coming. The night before the final interview, I barely slept. It wasn't nerves. It was something deeper. For years, I had been humiliated, underestimated, dismissed by the one person who was supposed to have my back. Now, fate had handed me a moment I never expected. My brother sitting across from me, unknowingly asking for a seat at my table. The next morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. I chose the executive conference room, the one with the panoramic city view and glass walls that screamed authority. I placed 2 glasses of water on the table, one for him, one for me. Then I waited. 10 minutes before the scheduled time, I heard footsteps outside the door. I stood by the window, back turned, watching Seattle's skyline. "Mr. Blackwell, the CEO will be with you shortly," my assistant said. He entered, thanked her, and took a seat. I let the silence hang. Then slowly, deliberately, I turned around. He looked up and froze. I watched his mouth fall slightly open, eyes widening, face draining. "Tori?" His voice cracked. I smiled gently. "Good morning, James. Please, have a seat." He was already seated, but his posture shifted like he didn't know how to sit anymore. What? What are you doing here?" "I work here," I said evenly. "Actually, I run here." He blinked. "You run Meridian?" I walked over to the table, picked up his resume. "Well," I said, flipping through the pages, Impressive background. Ivy League, 12 years in structured finance, 4 years as VP of Portfolio Strategy. I looked up and locked eyes with him. And a history of offering financial advice to your little sister at every family dinner. He winced. Tori, look, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I interrupted. That's the point. He leaned forward, suddenly very still. Is this your company? I nodded. Founded it, scaled it, still owns 71%. Silence. For once, James had no comeback, no smirk, no patronizing sigh, just a man, stripped of all assumptions, sitting in front of a truth he never saw coming. You've built something incredible, he said quietly. I mean it. I studied him. Was this sincerity or just survival? I read your application, James, I said. You're qualified, you're talented, and you clearly need a job. He looked down. Yeah. I exhaled. I'm not going to reject you, but if you want this position, there's one condition. He looked up again, surprised. You will complete the full respect and communication training that every employee takes. No skipping. No exceptions. And you will earn every ounce of trust in this building the same way I did, from the ground up. He nodded slowly. Fair. Good, I said, standing up. Then welcome to Meridian Holdings. I extended my hand. He stared at it for a moment, then reached out and shook it. His grip wasn't firm. It was humbled, human. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for him, but for me. Because that day, I didn't just reclaim my power, I rewrote our story. And there was no going back. James's first day at Meridian was awkward, to say the least. Our staff onboarding process was meticulous, equal parts orientation, compliance, and culture setting. Every new hire, regardless of position, started with 2 weeks of team shadowing and workshops, including our signature Respect and Communication program. It was designed for humility. And James? He got the full experience. I didn't treat him like family. I didn't even acknowledge him publicly. To everyone else, he was the new CFO candidate on probationary track. To him, I was simply Ms. Blackwell. The first few days, he barely spoke. I caught glimpses of him in the cafeteria, sitting alone, reviewing internal audits, listening intently during meetings. He didn't try to pull rank. He didn't name drop. He just listened. It was strange seeing James like that, stripped of ego, focused, quiet. He completed the communication training without complaint, took notes, participated in group exercises. When it came time for the final session, an open reflection, he stood in front of a dozen employees and said, I used to think leadership was about dominance, winning every room, being the smartest guy at the table, but in the last few weeks, I've realized something. I didn't understand respect, not until I had to earn it, without anyone knowing my last name or where I used to work. I just want to say thank you to this company and to its leadership for giving me that chance. There was a silence in the room. Then, light applause. Polite, but real. The HR manager pulled me aside afterward. He's taking this seriously, she said. I nodded, but didn't smile. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for transformation. Week by week, James grew into his role. He streamlined a messy vendor contract, caught a billing error that saved us over $80,000, and quietly mentored 2 junior analysts. He never once asked for special treatment. He never once used the word sister. He called me Ms. Blackwell until the day I walked into his office and shut the door behind me. Enough of the formality, I said. He looked up from his monitor. Okay, he said. Tori. And for the first time, it didn't feel sarcastic. I sat down across from him. I saw your draft report for Q2, I said. It's good work, tight margins, clear projections. Thanks, he said. Then hesitated. I wasn't sure if I should have added commentary about the grant funding structure. You made the right call, I said. Your instincts are solid." He nodded once, then looked at me. Really looked. "You didn't have to let me in," he said. "After the way I treated you. After everything I said over the years." "No, I didn't," I agreed. "But I wasn't doing it for you." He looked confused. "I did it for me," I said. "Because I'm not who I used to be. And you don't get to define me anymore. I let you in because I could. Because that's power." He sat back, absorbing every word. No argument, no defense, just acceptance. Later that month, during a quarterly all-hands meeting, I stood at the front of the auditorium and introduced him properly for the first time. "Our CFO, James Blackwell," I said, "joined us just a few months ago, but he's already made an impact. What I respect most isn't just his skill, but his willingness to grow." He stepped up to the podium, visibly moved. We didn't talk about our past. We didn't need to. The past had already been rewritten by every silent hour he'd put in since that day in the conference room. And for the first time since we were kids, I looked at my brother and saw an equal. 6 months into James's tenure at Meridian, I was invited to speak at a National Health Innovation Summit in San Francisco. It was our first big public moment. Until then, we had built everything quietly, behind the scenes, but now, the spotlight was coming. Our story, Neurotech's journey from a scrappy post-layoff project to an industry disruptor, was beginning to attract serious media attention. And with it came new challenges, new scrutiny, and some familiar critics. One evening, after a long investor call, I received an email from my father. No greeting, just a YouTube link. I clicked. It was a podcast, some niche finance show James had been a guest on before he joined us. In it, he spoke casually about entrepreneurial siblings who play startup but never scale, laughing with the host. "You know the type," he said smugly. "Cute little projects with no profit margins. You give them a year before they collapse or get absorbed." The host laughed. "So, no faith in the underdogs?" James had grinned. "If you want results, bet on the sharks." The clip was 3 years old, but it still stung. This was the brother who now worked under me, who claimed to have changed, who had stood in my office weeks ago and told me how much he respected what I'd built. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I walked into the office and called a leadership meeting. James arrived last, as usual, coffee in hand. He froze the moment he saw the screen. I had paused the podcast at the moment his grin froze on the camera. No sound, just image. I turned to the team. "This clip is from 2022, I said evenly. "Before any of you worked with James, before Meridian brought him on board." I watched his eyes dart. He knew what was coming. "I debated whether to bring this up," I continued, "but I believe in transparency and accountability, not for punishment, but for perspective." I turned to him directly. "James, do you remember this interview?" He cleared his throat. "Yes," he said. "I was a different person back then." A pause, a very long one. Then he looked around the room, at the engineers, the analysts, the HR lead, the VP of operations. He stood up and said, "I was arrogant. I spoke without understanding what it meant to build something from nothing. I judged what I didn't know, and I mocked what I now admire. I'm not proud of it, but I am responsible for it. If anyone here feels that my presence undermines their work or this company's integrity, I will step down." Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Then the head of product leaned forward and said, "We've all made mistakes. What matters is what you've shown here, in real time." Another voice chimed in. "He's earned his place." I didn't speak. I just looked at James, and he looked at me. Not as siblings, not as adversaries, but as two people who had finally met eye to eye. That night, he sent me an email. "Tori, I used to think you were fragile. What I've learned is, you're unbreakable. And it's the most humbling thing I've ever witnessed. Thank you for not slamming the door. I'm proud to work for you. I'm even more proud to be your brother." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because for once, he finally understood what silence meant. And this time it didn't come from shame. It came from respect. A year later, we stood side by side at our company's 10-year anniversary gala. James had just finished presenting the quarterly report to a room full of investors, clients, and partners. He was confident, clear, humble. The same brother who once mocked me was now helping lead a vision I built with nothing but stubborn hope and late-night coding marathons. After his presentation, he stepped off stage, walked over, and quietly said, "I didn't just apply for a job that day, Tori. I was unknowingly asking for a second chance. Thank you for giving it to me." I didn't need an apology. What I needed was growth, and he gave me that. He no longer treated me like the little sister with a hobby. He listened. He respected. He saw me. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real now. Built not on childhood hierarchy, but mutual understanding. The truth is, I never planned revenge. I never waited for the tables to turn. I just kept building. And when the moment finally came, when I could have rejected him, humiliated him, shut the door, I chose something else. I chose power with grace, and that changed everything. Moral: sometimes the greatest revenge is quiet success, not to hurt them, but to heal you. Because when you stop trying to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it, you give yourself permission to rise. What did you think of this story? If you were in Tori's shoes, would you have hired James or slammed the door? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever been underestimated, this one's for you. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris so you never miss a powerful new karma story every single day.